Are you sitting on your daily commute thinking longingly about your next holiday? Are you filled with so much wanderlust that you've got no idea where to go next? Or have you got your next trip booked and in the bag and you're looking for tips and tricks to make it all go smoothly? Then, welcome to the TRAVELUST Podcast. Join me, Sam Sparrow, every fortnight as I chat to the people who've built their life around a desire to experience the world. As a travel blogger and wannabe professional city breaker, I'm nosy, and we get deep into travel memories, favourite destinations, and tips to make your next trip go with a bang. This week, I'm chatting to Sophie Cliff, who is a city break obsessive just like me. I've been following her adventures on sophiecliff.com and getting amazing city break tips from her, so I'm delighted that she's sharing her wisdom today. We get real about maximising your holiday allowance and travel budgets and talk about how Sophie plans her trips, as well as focusing in on her favourite destination, New York. Sophie talks about how the magic of Disneyland impacted her travels as an adult and why a particular destination just didn't live up to her expectations. We also talk about how everyone needs to visit Leeds for the foodie culture. Remember to tweet me at Sam R. Sparrow with the hashtag TheTravelUst with your favourite travel tips and memories and your perspective on what we discuss. You can find even more travel content on my website asthesparrowflies.com along with all of the podcast episodes. Are you packed? Then let's go. So I'm really excited today that we have the wonderful Sophie, Cliff/Airy on the podcast today. I literally nearly went, we have the lovely Sophie Cliff. And I was like, but Sophie is Sophie Airy now.
I'm having an identity crisis.
Are you?
I don't know who I am anymore.
It took me a really long time to get used to it, actually. But I love when I can interview amazing friends and people that I know on the podcast. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So for those listeners that don't know who you are, would you mind giving a little introduction?
Yep, so I'm Sophie Cliff and I write the blog sophiecliff.com, very original. And my blog is all around, it's a true lifestyle blog in that I cover lots of different topics. And one of them that is quite prevalent is travel. So lots of different things there. And I write my blog around a full-time job as well.
And we'll get onto this later, but we've both talked about wanting to be professional city breakers. Yep. So I know that the city break is quite prevalent in your kind of travel habit, which is awesome. So I've interviewed lots of different kind of backpackers, long haul travellers, city breakers, and I'm excited to talk to you because I think our travel styles at the moment, at this point in our lives, really match up. So that'll be really exciting and get lots of tips from you. But before we dive in, I'd really like to ask you about what your earliest travel memory was as a child.
My earliest travel memory is, and it's quite funny actually, because this is the company that I actually work for, but it was going to Disneyland. I went to Disneyland Paris when I was probably about 5 or 6. I think it was the first time I'd been abroad. We went on the Eurostar and it was all very exciting. I went with my mum and my nan and my little sister. And I can just remember it being so exciting. And the funniest thing is, I remember my mum had bought us these little cameras from Boots, like little film cameras for kids. And I've still got all the photos that I took on that trip.
Oh my goodness, that's a blog post waiting to happen.
I need to go rooting around my mum's house for them. But I can remember so vividly just standing and taking photos of things. And it's funny because that's what I've grown up and ended up doing as much as I can. But my mum probably got me started on a little habit there quite early by buying those little cameras from Boots.
Those, do you know what? I miss them. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love like digital photography and how easy everything is. But like the disposable cameras, or you used to get the disposable cameras that had like the underwater, like plastic casing.
Yeah.
That you could. But I remember on my honeymoon, I used one of those when I went snorkeling.
You can actually
get
some quite cool ones now. My friend bought me a black and white disposable camera to use on my hen do. And I've still yet to get the photos developed, but it was really fun, like not being able to check it straight away afterwards and go, oh, I look awful. Or
yeah, it's so interesting, particularly when I think about travel photography, like how much like the upgrades in camera has really impacted a little bit how I travel. Because I remember I've looked back on some of the photos I took when I was in Australia when I was 11, and I mean, they are literally the worst. I think because I was 11, so probably wasn't that good.
Black.
Yeah, but they've got like I don't know if you remember, like when you had the film cameras, every now and then you'd get like a little flare in it, like the light had come in a wrong thing, so it looked like half the picture was on fire and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I look back on those pictures really fondly, and I guess you do too with your Disneyland ones.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's the less pressure when you're young, and B, when you don't know what it's going to turn out like. You don't spend a really long time trying to capture the perfect shot or worrying about how it'll look on Instagram.
Yeah, well, quite. Yeah, and that's the biggest source of contention between myself and my husband when taking travel snaps. But yeah, so an Insta husband I do not yet have. But you've been to, so that's quite interesting that Disneyland Paris was kind of one of your earliest travel memories, because you've been to Disneyland Paris quite a few times since then. Is that right? Or have I just felt like it?
No, I have. We went quite regularly when I was little. We almost made it, like, after that first trip, we made it a little annual break that me, my sister, my mum and my nan would go on. And we did that for about 4 or 5 years, I think.
Wow.
And then I've been quite recently, because I work for Disney, so it's quite easy to get some tickets and go. So I've been, I think, like 3 times in the past couple of years. And again, it was one of those things where I was like, when I first started working there, I thought, oh, it sounds quite fun. I'll go and try it. And it's always a nice little addition when you're in Paris anyway. Yeah, it's good fun. And it's good fun to just forget that you're an adult with responsibilities and bills, and, you know, just go meet Mickey Mouse instead.
Yeah, see, I'm desperate to go because I want to meet Tigger. I've never been to any Disney in the States or in Paris. And I think I need to go because I want to have breakfast with Tigger, basically.
I feel like it could change your thoughts on Paris as well.
Yeah, long documented thoughts on hating Paris. Maybe I just need to go to Disney and everything will change. So how do you think that some of those early travel experiences, so I think it's really interesting that kind of Paris is, and Disneyland Paris is your first one, because I grew up largely camping in Dorset. And I think that really did shape for a long time my travel kind of experiences. So I'm fully into camping. I joined the Girl Guides. Like, that was a thing that I really, really loved. It's only as I've got older that I prefer a bit of luxury and comfort. But how did that kind of, that setup from your family taking you to Paris really shape how travel became a bigger part of your life?
I think there's a couple of different things here that have shaped travel. So firstly, so we did quite a lot of like city-based things when I was younger. So going to Paris, and my mum's best friend moved to Boston when I was about 11 or 12. And we used to quite regularly go over and visit her during our summer holidays. So we would do a lot of like city-based things then. So either in Boston, or I remember one time we went to New York, and it was like the best thing ever to 13-year-old me.
Wow.
And I grew up in like a small town in the Northwest, so going and seeing these cities was really, really exciting. And then on the other side of things, my nan and granddad had a caravan in the Lake District, and they used to take us up there pretty much every other weekend. And we'd stay in their little caravan, and we'd go for little days out to different places. And I think that has given me a real strong love of the countryside and that sort of thing. So I've really had a balance of the two, and holidays now for me tend to either be very full-on city break activities, or they are, you know, going for a weekend away somewhere in the middle of nowhere, going for nice long walks. You know, part of the reason why we love living in Leeds is because we can be, you know, 20 minutes away and go for a really like great adventure in the middle of nowhere. So I think those two things combined have really shaped my holiday interests. And I think outside of weekends away in the countryside and city breaks, we don't really do that much, you know, different sort of travel, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, and I did go through the phase of doing, the 2 weeks on the beach when I knew that I didn't have any other time or money to travel anywhere else, and we just wanted a holiday where we could forget everything. And we still fit in cultural things, like that's always been a mix. But it's quite interesting. I love the idea of beach holidays. Because it all just sounds so idyllic. And don't get me wrong, free cocktails from dusk till dawn is the dream.
I'm reading lots of books.
Yeah, but I think, I get bored quite easily and I like to have more things to do. I'm not a lie by the pool kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're similar in that respect.
And I think a big part of it for me is that my husband definitely isn't a lie by the pool sort of person. So he's definitely shaped, he's bored within 20 minutes. So city breaks are a good compromise of being able to, see lots of things, do lots of things, eat lots of great food that works for us.
Yeah, and you found when you went to New York recently, which I was just, because I've only been to New York in the winter, and so now I'm definitely rethinking my life to try and plan a New York in the summer because it looked amazing. But you have managed to get a really great balance, because I know I was stalking your Insta stories when you did a rooftop swimming pool and cocktails kind of day vibe. So there's definitely ways of seeking out that kind of stuff if you want it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth remembering that you can fit that in other places if you only want it for a day or two, whereas you can't really fit loads of culture and sightseeing into some of those beach holidays. So it's prioritizing which is the most important, I think.
That's really true. I think definitely. I think it comes through in phases as well. There was a definite time in my life where long haul somewhere tropical was definitely on the cards, but now
absolutely. And I think sometimes you do just need it, like you said, around, like, I remember we had a really stressful year where we both started new jobs and moved house, and we did go away to Turkey and just like lay by the pool for a week, and I think I read 7 books, drank like my body weight in pina coladas, and it was great, and it's just what we needed, but it's not our go-to, I suppose.
So how do you, it's clear that you like either city breaks or that kind of getting lost in a forest somewhere. And actually it's interesting that your hen do, you did, was it at Jolly Days?
It was,
camping
Jolly Days in York.
in the middle of a forest as a hen do. So I think it really sums up, you had a city break as your mini moon, and then your hen do was kind of camping in the middle of a forest. So I think that really sums up the two sides of what you really enjoy doing. But how do you, so when you've decided to go away, what's your process?
So I wish I could say that I had a really scientific process here. One big thing that shapes our holidays and our trips is that Sam and I both work full time. I have quite a generous holiday allowance, but as any person who loves traveling will tell you, it's never quite enough. So we usually tend to work it based on a holiday year, and I like to try and fit in as many trips as humanly possible into that annual leave. So quite often it will start by looking at, right, what times of year do we want to try and go away, or do we want to have a winter city break, or are we looking for something to do as more of a summer holiday? A lot of the time it will start based on where we can get cheap flights to, which I think for a lot of people who go on regular city breaks, it's a key starting point for them as well. And then once we've found some flights that fit in to our schedule and are reasonably priced, then start doing a little bit more research on whether it's a city we'd really like to visit, whether it's something we'd really like to do. And once we've got maybe 2 or 3 of those plotted in throughout the year, I feel like a little bit more comfortable. Then I feel like I can, survive the 9 to 5 knowing that I've got something to look forward to and count down to. And then I think with more sort of local and, more sort of relaxing breaks in the countryside, we very much try and utilise weekends for them so that we're not having to take loads of time off work. So we've done a couple of things over the past year. We went to North Star Club, which is owned by the same people as Jolly Days, which was amazing, beautiful, like luxurious yurts in the middle of the forest.
Oh, stop.
Up to the
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, honestly, it was like big. People say like glamping, and you think, oh, it's still going to be, creepy crawlies and stuff. But this place had roll top baths that looked out into the woods, and it was incredible. We went up to the lakes last weekend again, just for one night. But I think when you go somewhere so remote and you're so far removed from your day to day, you feel like you've had a really great break. So, yeah, for us, it pretty much starts within that holiday year, trying to plot out a couple of trips. And quite honestly, over the past year, a lot of that has been shaped around either our own wedding or friends' weddings as well. So, for example, we're off next weekend to the south of France for my best friend's wedding, and we've managed to add on a trip to a couple of days in Madrid on that trip based on working out, that cheap flight process, which is great. And then once we've got a couple of things in the diary, then trying to see what we can fit around that. We do usually tend to try and have a sort of spring city break, a bit of a bigger summer holiday, and then a like more Christmas time city break tends to be our pattern that we try and stick to.
Yeah, I think we approach things in quite a similar way. I've also got a pretty generous leave allowance, but like you, it's never enough. And with Andrew, my husband, his work, he's always all over the place, so it can be really difficult to fit it in. And I also have to fit our travelling around the Premier League fixture list.
Yeah, well, Sam being a musician, it's similar, fitting it around festival dates and gigs and things like that.
So yeah, that planning up front we usually tend to do. So we usually tend to do something at the end of January, although I'm exhausting our kind of list of places that Andrew will go where it's not freezing cold. So he's pissed. I took him to Oslo and to Berlin and he nearly died of cold, and he's a warm-blooded chap. So I'm kind of, need to rethink that one. But we
cards for now.
Yeah, I mean, so you talk about looking at where flights are cheap, because I know you've been to Oslo as well, but I think you lucked out slightly better with the weather than we did. I didn't even really think it through. I did the Skyscanner search everywhere, and it was like $9.99 flights to Oslo. Bingo, I'm going to book these. And it was only really like at Christmas when I presented these tickets to Andrew, and my mum presented him with this huge like Russian furry hat. But I was like, I don't understand. And then I looked at like the weather as -16 and I went, oh fuck, what have I done?
Yeah, it's so funny because we went in December, so only a month before, and I mean it was cold, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like any colder really than anywhere in Europe I would have expected.
That's so funny.
So yeah, it was, but that was a true case of we went there purely based on the convenience of flights, because the flight left Manchester I think at 8 p.m. on a Friday night and flew back at 6 p.m. on a Sunday. So we didn't take any holiday from work, just finished work, went to the airport, had a brilliant weekend away, came back, and not even a single day's annual leave, and we'd managed to tick another place off the list. So
you did that for Milan as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we did, yeah. Quite often people will search on what's cheapest, but definitely something we've tried to do recently is look at what's most convenient and will eat up the least amount of annual leave, but give us a decent chunk of time in the city, because we've done that. I did it with my friends a couple of years ago. We went to Paris just for the weekend, didn't take any annual leave. So I'm quite lucky as well at work, because during the summer holiday period, we're allowed to finish work at 3 p.m. on a Friday, which really frees up, being able to get to the airport for a 5 o'clock flight or whatever. So I really do try and take advantage of that as much as possible. And, the classic bank holidays and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about, and the way that you plan it is really helpful to those people that have got full-time jobs and just can't jet off for long periods of time, because I think sometimes you can get so stuck in that I don't have enough annual leave that you end up not booking anything. So I think your tips have been really helpful. That
approach really works when you're booking things with friends, because I think when you're going away with your partner, you both know how much annual leave you've got. You've both got pretty much similar commitments, socially, and things that you might need to take other days off for. But when you go away with friends, everyone has such varying levels of annual leave. a lot of people might have, family holidays booked, or, time off for weddings or whatever. So being able to filter on how you can go away without anyone having to take annual leave and still get that quality time together is really important, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's something that came up when I was talking to Ellie, so from The Wandering Quinn. So either that episode would have gone out before or after. So I don't know. That's a mix. You'll soon be able to see that if you're listening to this podcast. But we were talking about going away with people that have different travel styles, and it's definitely something that I found when I've been trying to book short breaks away with friends that are casual travellers, as opposed to how quick it was when we booked to go away with Beverly. That was kind of signed, sealed, delivered within about 25 minutes via Twitter DM, because we travel in quite a similar way. We've all got the mindset, we know kind of how quick you've got to be to jump on these deals. And we were like, yeah, sure. Okay, done. Whereas sometimes negotiating the kind of personalities within a group of casual travelers can be really, really hard.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well, it's where people get the enjoyment. Because I know with some of my friends, the bit that they love about going away is like doing the research, looking at different deals, trying to decide what destination they're going to go to. And they get so much joy out of that research trip. Whereas for me, it's the buzz of actually booking it. So I'm like, see some flights, quickly check with Sam that he's up for it, book it, because that's where that's the bit that I enjoy. But I know that some of my friends will like create really, in-depth, intricate spreadsheets of where they could go and what they could do and what the best deals are. And they just love that bit. And I think it is sometimes even not necessarily about the travel style, but just about, some people are really impulsive like me. Some people are a little bit more in the detail and get a real buzz out of that. So,
and I think some people are more like me and will go anywhere. I mean, literally, I will travel anywhere. Yeah, so I don't need to have a list.
That's everyone always says to me, "Where's on your list?" And I'm like, I would literally go anywhere.
I just don't think there's anywhere. Yeah, I just don't think there's anywhere that I would go, no, I'm not interested in that. Yeah. And it's like when I present really weird destinations in like Prague to Andrew, and he's like, "What? Why?" And I'm like, "Why not?"
Yeah, it's interesting to somebody, so it must be.
Ryanair have got a lot to answer for, because they do fly to absolutely batshit places. And I think that when I look at Ryanair flight sales, that's what gets me interested in all these weird little places in Europe. But I'm like, I could go there. That'd be great. I could go there.
Honestly, so many of our like travel destinations, I think interestingly, when Sam and I first got together and first started going on holiday together, that where the cheap flights were a bit really played a big role in where we decided to go, because we were, both just out of uni, quite skint, didn't have loads of money. And quite often, our first couple of trips together where we went to Paris, we went to Berlin, I think we also went to Barcelona. And it was purely based on the fact that, those three places were really cheap to get to with either Ryanair or EasyJet or whatever. But it really gave us a buzz for city breaks. And, we found that style of holiday worked really well for us as a couple. And it's what we've carried on doing. And I think, that cheap flight bit definitely does play a big role in us deciding, but it almost helped shape as well our travel style, I think. So I think it's definitely a new thing for our generation. I know my mum and dad still struggle with, well, if we book it all separately, will it still all work out? And but for us, we love that, finding an Airbnb or a hotel in the area we want to stay in, and researching all of the different places to go out to eat and things to see and do.
I think generationally that's really interesting, because I think probably our parents' generation is the package holiday generation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's where it became really big. And it influenced quite a lot of my early travel, because that's what I went on with as I got older. So I didn't do much foreign travel when I was younger, but once I got to about 16, so when I was 16, I went to the Dominican Republic with my parents for a week. I went back there with a boyfriend when I finished A-levels. That then shaped what happened when Andrew and I met. And like our honeymoon was in Mexico for 2 weeks, all inclusive. We did Cuba that way, because that's kind of how we went on holiday. I didn't very often see my parents do city breaks.
Yeah.
And I think the only city break really that I'd done was go to Barcelona, because going to Barcelona for a long weekend, that was also quite a normal thing that sort of started to become more popular as I hit sort of 18, 19.
Yeah.
And it's only really, I think, through reading travel blogs actually, and realising, like, changing jobs and having a bit more freedom and wanting to see so many places, that city breaks have suddenly become kind of what I really want to do. And I know that I need to start doing them solo, because I think mine and Andrew, my husband's travel styles, he's still in the, but can we just go lie on a beach somewhere? Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like you say, everyone does have such a different approach to those things, that I think when you do read a lot of travel blogs, you're constantly being fed with inspiration of different places you can go and different things you can go and see. And I think sometimes my family will say to me, like, "Are you going on another holiday again?" And I'm like, "Well, but yeah, can't you understand that it's it's like almost like a travel bug within you that you can't, no matter how much you feed it, it's never quite satisfied."
Yeah, and I think as well, it's not. So I feel quite differently now about kind of how I position travel. Like I'm not, in a way, I'm not going on holiday. It's not like how, I'm going on a 2-week holiday and that's it. I mean, obviously I am going on holiday, but it feels different to me. And I've done a lot of weekend breaks this year, and my parents are exasperated with how much I'm going away. But for me, it now just feels normal. Yeah. So I've got nothing booked in for a while, and I'm like, oh my God.
Getting the shakes.
Yeah. Oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I need to book somewhere. So
I think another thing people always say as well, whenever we book a city break, no matter where it is to, you always get the thing of, but it's so expensive there. And I think people sometimes feel like they can't do a lot of city breaks because they have this perception of, Paris is really expensive, Barcelona's really expensive, New York's really expensive. But it's just about being able to do your research. And, if you're going to eat in Times Square, it is going to be really expensive. But if you're going to go to a little food hall and get a slice of pizza and some dumplings, you can spend less than $5 on your dinner. So it's, I think there is a common perception of city breaks being really expensive and, like a real treat, when actually you can do them, you can have a weekend away for less than you would spend in your own hometown on, going on a night out or going for a couple of meals.
Yeah, and also, particularly as well, like, I mean, I didn't actually find Paris that expensive, but I think because I live in London, I've got a really warped sense of what's expensive and what isn't.
Yeah,
but if you go,
isn't it?
Yeah, but if you go to places like, so Berlin, we went in Poland, in Prague, it is cheaper than staying at home, quite literally. When the beer is the equivalent of 90p a pint, I mean, you staying at home is more expensive. You're saving money by going away. So that's quite good. So you've been to lots of different cities and beyond, and other places too. What would you say? So I'm gonna be mean. I'm gonna make you pick a favourite.
Hands down, New York, without any hesitation. Yeah, I've got a little bit of an obsession with that place, and like I mentioned earlier on, I went there for the first time when I think I was 12 or 13, when we were visiting my mum's best friend on a trip to Boston. And I remember just being like in awe of it then. And Sam and I went back together for the first time, I think it'll probably be 4 years this Christmas. And we've been 4 times since. Like, we are just obsessed with it and, absolutely love it. And every time we go back, we think, is this going to be the time that it's going to become a little bit disappointing to us? And it never is. So it's unfortunate because it's, you know, one of the more expensive city breaks to get to. I was like, why can't we just love like Berlin this much, and then we could go really regularly? But it is just a place that even thinking about it like makes me giddy.
And how would you, so, I mean, I've been to New York once, and I went away on a girly trip with my mum, and we had an absolute ball. And I was like, if I had been young and single and had come here when I was 18, I would have totally tried to move here. That's how I felt, quite similar to you. And I've not made it back yet, but I will. And I'm definitely going to pick summer because I'm just in awe of all of the awesome things you get up to. You know, you've been to New York a lot. It's your favorite destination. What are your tips for kind of managing the budget in terms of both getting there, accommodation, that kind of thing?
So flights, I would definitely say really do your research and be savvy. So there are lots of places that you can, a lot of airlines that fly to New York from the UK, and we've trialed it with lots of different types of airlines. So I think the first time we went with Delta, which was pretty standard. The second time we actually flew with Jet2, who do, they only fly there at Christmas. They do like Christmas shopping breaks, but I think our return flights were like £320 or something like that. It was really cheap, but you know, it wasn't a really pleasant flight because you were flying on a plane that would usually fly you to Tenerife or whatever. But for us, we were like, do you know what? 6 hours of being uncomfortable. We can read a book. We don't need loads of in-flight entertainment, and we're going to get to the city that, you know, we really, really love. So, and then another way of getting there that we did a couple of years ago was flying with Icelandair. So we did a stopover in Iceland on the way to New York, and I think those flights were £400 return, but to fly from Manchester to Reykjavik is £150. So the way we saw it was, you know, it's a destination we've wanted to go to. Iceland we had wanted to go to anyway. We'd always put it off because the flights were a little bit pricey compared to other places in Europe. But getting to both New York and Iceland for less than, you know, for around £400 was a really great deal. So I would definitely say do your research, see if you can tag it on with any of the trips that, you know, you can then make it into a big, we did that as like our main summer holiday trip. So saved up for it for a really long time.
That's such a good tip, you know, because I've been seeing ages. So I stalk holiday pirates on a day-to-day basis. And I've seen loads of combining Iceland with New York. And I've been scratching my head about it and going, I mean, cool, but why? And now that makes total sense.
I think it's a big thing that the Icelandic Tourist Board have done in partnership with Icelandair to get more people going there. And it's not just New York that you can do it with. You can do it like to go to Boston or Chicago. But it was great because they were a brilliant airline. We had 3 brilliant days in Iceland, and then it's such a nice feeling to know that you're not just going home, you're then getting on a flight to go, you know, to New York as well. So I would really recommend that, and the flights are incredibly reasonable for, you know, the great service and the great flight that you get. So I would recommend all of those things, and also seeing if it's ever cheaper to travel from a different city. So a couple of times for us, it's been so much cheaper to travel from Heathrow that even with our train tickets from Leeds to London, it still worked out more reasonable to fly from down there. So again, just being really flexible. Also being flexible on what days you go. So if you're going to try and make it like a long weekend, you will pay more for flights. Whereas if you can go on like a Saturday or Sunday and come back midweek, you can save quite a lot of money that way. And then from an accommodation perspective, if we'd have been having this chat about 18 months ago, I'd have said Airbnb all the way because it was so much more reasonable. But they've actually brought in a new law in the state of New York, which means that people can't sublet their apartments anymore. So that means that the only apartments on Airbnb are those that are owned by a landlord, which obviously makes it much more expensive. There's less supply. So we found on our most recent trip that Airbnb wasn't actually that much cheaper than staying in a hotel. So this was actually the first trip where we'd stayed in a hotel in New York. So for this time, we actually booked it, and this is going back to like what we were saying earlier about package holidays. We actually booked a flight and hotel package on Expedia.
Oh, nice.
And we managed to save a fortune because they had a partnership with Doubletree by Hilton. So I think for a week in New York with both of our flights, 7 nights accommodation that was literally like down the road from Grand Central Station, we paid around £700 each, which was incredible.
Stop it. That's insane. That's so cheap.
And we were there over the 4th of July as well. So it was like a holiday season. And we'd literally looked just out of interest on Expedia and found that deal. So I would definitely, it is worth doing your research there, because you can save a hell of a lot of money, especially when hotels are so expensive there. The other thing I would say as well is a couple of times we've stayed in Brooklyn rather than Manhattan. And when we went a couple of years ago, we stayed in a place called Prospect Park. And that was like half the price of staying in Manhattan. So if you're not so bothered about traveling in and out from, a little bit further away, I would definitely say look at Brooklyn, because it's an incredible city within itself. And you can, you can see so much more of how the locals live and things like that if you're willing to spend a little bit more time on the underground.
Yeah, and the subway's pretty good in New York, right?
Yeah, really regular. It's air conditioned, which is like a dream in the summer. And it's so cheap. You can buy a Metro card for the week, which gives you unlimited rides. And I think it's $32, which when you compare that to what you pay for a travel card in London for a week, it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, that's really reasonable. It makes my heart hurt every time I've got to pay a travel card in London.
I think I spent £12 just getting to my office when I come down to London. So,
oh God! Top tip, actually. I've only really just worked this out because I don't regularly travel into London for work anymore. I was doing a top up on an Oyster card to do pay as you go, and I've since found out that if you just do the pay as you go on contactless card, so don't have it on an Oyster card, just have it on your contactless, it is marginally cheaper.
oh,
And that's cheeky because TfL do that because tourists will buy an Oyster card because it's what you do. So locals tip, and you can register your contactless card with Oyster online so that you can check that they've taken the right amount, and you can track it in the same way as you would track a normal Oyster card.
Oh, that's real top tip.
Top tip, because it will just calculate for you based on all of the trips you've done, the kind of the cheapest, like the best value. Yeah.
That's really handy to know. Thank you.
Handy to know. There you go. Top tip. So New York is your hands down favourite destination. Have you travelled anywhere? Because we've both talked about we'll go anywhere, which is true. But have you travelled anywhere that perhaps hasn't lived up to your expectations or you haven't enjoyed so much?
Oh, this is an interesting one, because I am such a holiday type of person that I tend to love everywhere. But actually, the one place where I was a little bit disappointed was Copenhagen.
Oh, interesting.
And I was so disappointed because it's like, I think I'd read like 25 bloggers' guides to Copenhagen before we went. It looked like my dream destination. It's all the different beautiful coloured houses, really lovely culture, really nice people. We've been to a couple of different other places in Scandinavia. So we've been to Reykjavik in Iceland, we've been to Oslo, and absolutely loved both of those. So we were like, this is going to be great. We were on a bit of a Scandinavian buzz, and it really just, it was fine. We had a nice time, but I didn't come away like raving about the city like I normally do. So I think everywhere else I was like, I've come away being like, I'd definitely go back there. It was great. Love it, recommending it to friends. Whereas Copenhagen, I was a bit like, it was fine. Like, we didn't have a horrible time, but I wasn't like hooked on it. And I think there were a couple of reasons why. I think potentially the time of year we went might not have been brilliant, because it was, it's notorious as being a very cold, grey place. But also I didn't really get that buzz and that atmosphere that I always get when I go to a city. So I remember sort of getting off the train in the main square and thinking, it's quite quiet, it's quite calm. A couple of places where we'd gone out for dinner were just similar, no real buzzy atmosphere. It had all of the makings of what should have been, my ideal city break destination. I love like going to a food hall. I love, being able to wander around the canals and it all being very picturesque. But I just didn't really I suppose I didn't click with that atmosphere. And it almost felt a little bit too calm for me. It felt almost like, I don't know, going to like a small town in the UK, that kind of atmosphere, as opposed to going to London or Manchester.
Yeah, that's really interesting because Copenhagen, I mean, everywhere's on my list, but Copenhagen is particularly on my list. I really like Scandinavian countries. I went to Stockholm when I was much younger, and I'm desperate to go back. And I want to plan a kind of Copenhagen, Malmo, Stockholm kind of trip. But it's so interesting about sort of time of year and atmosphere and things like that, because I love Berlin. I absolutely love it. I love it because it's grey and a bit industrial. And
we went to Berlin in February and I was like, brilliant trip, wouldn't change it, which makes me apprehensive as to whether the weather thing is the the core thing that made me feel disappointed, but it definitely played a part.
But what's so interesting is Andrew now thinks he doesn't like Berlin, and I don't think that's true. I mean, obviously he knows his own mind, but I'm like, if we went
it
another
is not
time,
true.
it is not true. You do like Berlin, only because I'm desperate to go back. But I love Berlin. I love Germany. I'm just fully into that vibe. And we went for the Christmas market, so I wanted to take him, and it was just fucking cold. Like, I mean, it is chilly in Berlin most of the time anyway, because that Siberian wind just cuts you deep. And it was a bit relentless, like with the weather, but we were just like, battle on, we're just going to get this stuff done. And we had a great time, but he was just a bit like, I mean, it was a bit grey. And I'm like, but that's Berlin. That's like the point of it. And that's, but I think had we have gone in another time of year where perhaps it wasn't so Christmassy and full on there and was not quite so biting cold, I think he would have come away with a very different vibe of Berlin, like summer, beer garden kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think the other thing is the time of year. We went in March, I think it was, to Copenhagen. And a lot of the things were shut for the season. So like Tivoli, which is their big theme park, had closed because it was out of season. And there were a couple of things like that we couldn't do. I mean, we still saw and did loads, but it just it was a place that did feel expensive, like we were talking about before, and no amount of research could help us make it a little bit more budget friendly. It was a little bit less well connected than other cities, so you really were having to walk a really long way from one big site to the next. And I think all of that just like I say, we did both enjoy it, and I would go back and try it again, probably in the summer months, or maybe even like my sister is going this year for the Christmas markets, which I think would probably fit a little bit nicer because it would feel a little bit more magical and meant to be cold. But it's not like I wasn't coming away raving about it and thinking that's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, or that was really interesting, or anything like that.
That's really, really helpful personally for me, because Copenhagen's been on my list. So now I know I'm going to tap up you if I do decide to book. So you've talked about you're off to the south of France and Madrid. Madrid? Yes. You're off to the south of France and Madrid. What else is kind of in your future for travel?
So we've got another trip booked in October. So it was my husband's 30th birthday last weekend. So his birthday present was we are going to Bilbao and San Sebastian.
Oh my goodness. I love Bilbao.
Oh, well, we've never been to that region of Spain, so we're both really excited. We're both quite big foodies, so it should be right up our street. So we have that planned for October. We may or may not, finances relating, try and squeeze in a Christmas trip. We haven't done a European Christmas market for a couple of years now, and I'd really like to try and get one of them in before the year is out. And then next year is all around planning our big sort of official honeymoon trip. So we went to New York straight after the wedding because we didn't have enough annual leave to really do anything longer than a week. But next year we really want to do like a long West Coast road trip and fit in quite a lot of the cities. So starting maybe even in Canada, in Vancouver, driving down through Seattle and Portland and San Francisco. We're less bothered about the Southern California element, but really, doing that road trip and seeing as many things as we can within a couple of weeks.
Planning that is going to be literally the best fun ever.
I know. I've already got a spreadsheet.
Of course you have. For Christmas markets, because you can literally go to any European destination now and find a good Christmas market. One Christmas market that I think is absolutely amazing is the Aachen Christmas market in Germany. And so Aachen is not necessarily a city that you'd think to, or a place you'd think to visit in Germany, but their Christmas market is like on steroids.
Oh, wow.
It's like
Get that
huge. Just Google the Aachen Christmas market. And the really good thing about the Aachen Christmas market is actually you might be better off getting the Eurostar to Brussels and the train across the border because it's closer.
Well, there were really cheap flights to Brussels for the weekend we were looking at, actually, but we were like, Brussels isn't really high on our list, but if we can fly to Brussels and then get the train, that might work.
Yeah, to Aachen. Have a look at the pictures of the Aachen Christmas market. What I would say is I'm not necessarily convinced there's like that much else to do in Aachen. But yeah, if you're looking for like Germany does Christmas markets really well, and Aachen is pretty full on. So yeah. Have a look at that, particularly if you can get to Brussels cheaply, because it's a bit easier to get to Aachen from Brussels.
Top tip.
So I'm not actually going to ask you for your one specific top travel tip, right? Because basically everything you've said has been super helpful travel tips, particularly for those with full-time jobs looking to travel on a budget, and all of your New York tips are amazing. I'm going to talk to my mum about that whole Iceland, New York thing, because she wants to go to Iceland and always wants to go to New York. So I'm reckoning.
Honestly. And it's such a fab contrast of two completely different trips that by the time we got back, we felt like we'd been away for like a month because we explored like two whole different places. It was brilliant.
So exciting. I'm definitely up for that. But I want to ask you, so you're a Leeds lass, and I've spoken to a few of them. But I'm asking everyone on the podcast about their hometown, and if someone was to come and visit you or visit your hometown or city, what would you recommend that they do?
So in Leeds, I would definitely say eat.
How did I know that you were going to say that?
Yeah, foodie that I am. But Leeds has changed as a city so much over the past few years. So I've lived here for nearly 10 years. I moved to Leeds for uni. And it was great. It was like, I was so happy to be living in a city because I grew up in a small town. But the small town that I'd grown up in was between Manchester and Liverpool. So I was used to quite big, bustling cities. And Leeds wasn't that when I first moved here. But over the past few years, it has just had the most phenomenal regeneration, and so much investment has gone into the city. And as a result, we've got fantastic bars and restaurants popping up literally every week. There's somewhere new to go and try. I think I've been to 4 new restaurants just this month. So it's absolutely got a brilliant scene, and things like, bottomless brunches and really, world-class dinner and things like that. So that would be top on my list for people coming to Leeds. And next would be shopping, because that's another area that has had so much of the regeneration gone into it. So we've got a couple of brilliant areas to shop in now, both independent. We've got some really great independent stores, and also, the things that you would expect to find in cities. And finally, for anyone coming to Leeds, I'd say get out of Leeds as well, because what we are just so blessed with here is in 20 minutes you can be, like rolling hills, beautiful countryside. So places like Ilkley, Harrogate, you can go to Haworth and visit like Bronte country. It's just, there's so many places here. And Sam and I recently bought National Trust memberships a couple of months ago. And it's because there are just so many great places nearby us that we have never visited before. And we made a list of the ones that we'd like to try and tick off this year. And we thought it's worth us getting National Trust memberships because there are just so many gorgeous places near us. So I'd say, yeah, go to Leeds, shop, eat, get your fill, and then drive out of Leeds for half an hour and visit some of the gorgeous places nearby.
Amazing tips. I've fallen quite hard for Leeds, not because most of my favourite people live there, although that does play into it somewhat. But yeah, I think Leeds is definitely a place that I want to spend a little bit more time in.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, it's almost by chance. I moved here for uni, got a job here, almost by chance that I've ended up living here. But I feel really, really lucky that I do, because it's an unrecognisable city within the space of 10 years. And every day when I pop out at lunchtime, I'm like, oh, that's new. Oh, I've not seen that before. And it's an exciting place to live. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we say goodbye, I'm asking everyone this question, which hopefully will kind of make you think and won't be too cheesy. But what I want to know is, what does travel overall mean to you?
Oh, yeah, this is a good thinker. I think the main thing for me with travel is it's getting out of that daily routine. And I think being able to go somewhere, even just for the weekend, get out of your routine, it just gives you that, see some things that you wouldn't normally see. It gives you a whole fresh perspective. And I've never gone away, even for 24 hours anywhere, and not come back feeling reinvigorated, refreshed, full of ideas, full of inspiration. And I think and this is going to sound quite cheesy, but it gives you that reminder of the important things in life that I think you forget when you've got a 9-to-5 job and you've got a routine that you stick to. And I think for me, that's why I've never really been drawn to like long-term travel, because travel is almost like my escapism from the norm. And if it was to become my norm, it would lose that place, I think. But it's definitely, giving you the opportunity to go away, lift your head up, experience some new things, change your way of thinking potentially. And then, you might come home with jet lag, you might come home feeling tired, but ultimately, and again, this is going to sound like really cheesy. So you might be tired physically, but mentally you're really like refreshed, reinvigorated. You've, topped yourself up almost with all of those important things. And I think that's why I will always try and do it as much as I can, because it really does remind me, these are the important things in life: making memories, seeing new places, trying new things, and just getting out of your comfort zone a little bit.
So that's a bit of a drop mic moment. Amazing scenes. Absolutely agree with everything you've said. I think travel does so much for your mental health. So I would really agree. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Sophie. Where can people stalk you online?
I think I'm at Sophie Cliff pretty much everywhere. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz. And my blog is sophiecliff.com.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sophie, and have an amazing few trips.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of The Travelust, and I hope we've managed to inspire you to think about your next trip. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you gave it a little review and rating on iTunes or your podcast player of choice, so even more people can find their inner travel lust. Until next time, have a safe journey.